I'm Thomas from Meaningful Gigs, and welcome back to Heroes of the Creative Revolution. In this episode, I speak with Eavan Fallon of Indeed about her journey to creative operations and managing a global creative workforce. She talks about her origins in medicinal chemistry, the importance of skills-first hiring, the time she created a drive-through confessional to celebrate the Pope visiting Dublin, and much more. Let's dive in. Hey, Eavan, thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. Would love to start simple and just get more information about you and your background.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Thomas. It's a pleasure to be here. I can tell you a little bit about me. So my name is Eavan Fallon. I am a senior program manager on the ESG brand and advertising team at Indeed. Prior to that, I was the lead producer for Indeed Creative, which is the in-house creative agency at Indeed. And I'm from Dublin, Ireland. That's where I live at the moment. But my journey to Indeed was not a linear one, I have to say. So I actually have a degree in medicinal chemistry, would you believe? So my dream when I was younger was to be a pharmacist. I wanted to have my own chain of pharmacies. Funny the turns life takes, but so as part of my degree, I had to spend some time in Germany, and I was doing a research project over there in a lab. And when I graduated, I wanted to get as far away from the lab as I possibly could. It just, like working on your own, I find quite challenging. Like I'm a people person. I like to be with other people, working on a team. And the nature of the work was quite repetitive. So we were doing like the same thing to try and get a different result and, refine our results. So it's not dissimilar to marketing actually, and the creative process when you think about it. So it's not unusual that I actually, took a sidestep into the creative field. So on graduation, I wanted to get as far away from the lab as I could. So I applied for a job with Jameson Irish whiskey. So I think you guys call it Jameson.
We do.
Yeah, same thing, different name. We just pronounce it Jameson. So I applied for a job with them, and I worked sales marketing. Like I was their brand ambassador for Belgium, and then after that, they sent me to Switzerland, and I was like, "Oh, Switzerland! I've never been there before." They're like, "What do you think?" I was like, "Okay, yeah, why not?" There was a recession at the time, so there wasn't much happening in Ireland. So I said, "Okay, let's go for it." So I spent 2 years there, and then after that, I wanted to get a formal qualification in marketing because I really liked it. So I got a scholarship actually with the Irish Food Board. So I was based in Germany studying and working on like real projects for companies that were looking to kind of go into the German market or were already there and looking to improve their sales and marketing techniques. So I spent some time there, and after that I worked for some Irish food and drinks companies. And then I remember the day I worked on my first creative brief, and I just thought, okay, I want to be over this side. I want to be where these guys are. This sounds like way more fun. This sounds way more me. So like making the brief, seeing the work, critiquing the work, all that, I just found so interesting. So I went and knocked on some doors and got a job in an advertising agency on the client side. So I was account management. So I worked in advertising for a couple of years, and then sidestepped slightly into branding, brand strategy, design, and then I came to Indeed. So I've been at Indeed for 4 years. Like I said, I was on the creative in-house agency team before that as a lead producer for EMEA. So like everything that came through from Europe, all the design requests from like web, email, social, video, looked after all of those requests for Europe. And now I'm on the ESG brand and advertising team. So our work focuses predominantly on removing bias from the hiring process, with a particular focus on job seekers facing barriers. So those barriers would be, we have like 4 priority barriers. So one of them was like no college degree. One is veterans, people with disabilities, those who are justice impacted. So anyone who has a criminal record. So those are the 4. So justice impacted, no college degree, people with disabilities, and veterans. So those are the 4 barriers we're aiming to take bias away from in hiring.
Nice, and that's super meaningful. I'm glad people like you are focused on that. You and I talked about your passion for finding people jobs, not just in the office, but also in your personal life too. And I'm just curious, like, where does that innate desire come from?
I think for me, I can pinpoint it back to a particular experience that I'll tell you about in a second. But I think for me, I feel like if you learn something, it's kind of the onus is on you to share that information and to help other people. So, like to send the elevator back down, I guess. Like if you've kind of overcome something, like how can you share that with others so they can have like a better experience at it. So for me, the reason I can pinpoint it back to, I used to be terrified of interviews, you know, and I remember I finished my degree. I didn't really know like what I wanted to do next. And I had done my Erasmus in Germany, as I said, and my sister had a friend who was working in an insurance company, and they were looking for somebody who spoke German who could work in sales, selling insurance. And I was like, oh, I don't know, like, I'm not sure I have like the exact experience for this. Anyway, she was like, no, you could definitely do it. So learning of the story is like, you know, sometimes what you can do or what you can't do. But anyway, I went for the interview anyway, and like my blood just ran cold when she started speaking to me in German. Like I just wasn't prepared for that. And she asked me, why do you want to work in insurance? And all I could think of was that movie Along Came Polly, like when Ben Stiller is, you know, working in risk. And I just was like, I like the risk aspect. And, you know, I couldn't expand on that. So I just, after that experience, I was like, I never want to be in that situation ever again. So then once I learned there's like a formula for an interview, you can, you know, learn how to do it well. So I did a lot of interviews and kind of taught myself like how to sell myself better. So with that, then, you know, friends going for interviews, I would help them with prep or how to negotiate a better salary and those kind of things. So that's why it means so much to me.
You kind of touched on this a bit, but, you know, you're not just passionate about getting the job placements, but also the how behind and, like, you know, the process, how it happens and who gets a fair shot at the table. And I'm mainly referring to the skills first hiring movement. Can you kind of explain for me and the audience, you know, what that is and why it's so important and why it means so much to you?
Absolutely. So I think skills first hiring has been written about a lot in recent times. And I think we're only going to hear more and more about it, especially with AI. I think AI is going to really impact how people are hired and how people do hiring. So skills first hiring, you know, the definition, there's varying definitions on it, but essentially what it is when employers source and evaluate candidates based on their suitability and skills to do the job rather than proxies for skills. So when I say proxies for skills, I mean things like having a four-year college degree, previous employers. So like you worked at a big name company, oh, you must be good. Or, you know, excuse me, even things down to like your name, where you're from, like all those things can create bias in hiring, and people can make assumptions based on all those things and actually not really get a real sense of how well you might do in the role. So I think there's studies been done on it before that say somebody's level of work experience is actually one of the least valid indicators of how well someone will perform in a role. So that kind of summarizes what skills first hiring is. So with Indeed, we have partnered with Opportunity at Work. They're an agency in the US, and they have a campaign called Tear the Paper Ceiling, which aims to remove the paper ceiling essentially in hiring. So that means that people who don't have a college degree can apply for jobs. So like what we're aiming to do is get employers to remove that requirement from job descriptions. So like, do you actually need a four-year college degree for this role? Can somebody who has alternative skills do the job just as well? And 9 times out of 10, yes, probably they can. So Opportunity at Work call these people STARS. So STARS stands for Skilled Through Alternative Routes. So that's where the acronym comes from. So the movement is to remove this paper ceiling, remove barriers for people like STARS who may be veterans, they may be like at-home carers who have skills, but just maybe don't know how to quantify them or are excluded from job descriptions because they don't meet this baseline requirement of like having four-year college degree to get into roles. So there's 70 million Americans in the workforce in the US, obviously in the US, that don't have college degrees. So they are locked out of like better paying work, access to better opportunities. So, and then also, it's not just about people who don't have college degrees. Like I said, I think AI is going to take, it's going to have a huge impact on how people do hiring and how people get hired. So, employers are even saying that, they're not getting the skills they need even from new college grads. So like there's this whole other pool of talent in that 70 million people who don't have college degrees that could do the job but aren't getting the opportunity. So that's what we're aiming to do with that partnership, is to break down barriers and get better opportunity for everybody. And in turn, it will make the whole process, faster, fairer, and more efficient for everyone.
That makes a lot of sense. And as you say, I think it's super important with the acceleration of AI, right? Like that's kind of a whole other wave of complexity added to trying to assess, the performance of someone before they, have the role.
Yeah, and on that even, Thomas, just from myself, from a personal perspective, the job that I told you I applied for after college, I had a degree in medicinal chemistry. Very fortunate to be in a position where I had a 4-year college degree, but I didn't have what they were looking for. They wanted somebody who had a business degree or a marketing degree, which I didn't have. So as part of the application process, I sent in a video of myself. Like I went into the lab in the college and I set up a whiskey distillation and showed like, this is how you make alcohol. This is the distillation process. And a huge part of that role was explaining to people how you make whiskey. So, with creative thinking, which a lot of people have, but, they don't get the opportunity to showcase their skills until it's too late. So like, I was fortunate in that they took a chance on me by me showing them what I could do with a different way of thinking. So
yeah, and I love that. That's some real creative thinking right there. That's super cool. Like that's some critical thinking on the spot to like make sure you get your foot through the door.
It ended up being a springboard into a career in marketing that I may not have had otherwise.
That's a good segue over to creativity. So now with your work being so involved in the creative sphere, how are you able to kind of show creative's impact beyond just pumping out, deliverables?
So I think this is a really good question because like in larger companies, I think there's a tendency to think of the creative function as just another utility that we could measure and get an ROI and like, what's our burn on that? Where are we with hours? Like, how are we tracking? All those kind of things. And because of that sort of innate, let's quantify, what's our ROI? People can just churn through their list and just be like, okay, I need to get this done. We need social assets. Okay, let's just get them done. Let's brief it to the team. Let's go. And I think when you're under pressure like that, there's a tendency to not interrogate the brief and not interrogate potentially the problem that you're being asked to solve. Like what's been asked may not be the right solution for the problem at hand. So I can think of one example at Indeed that we had. I was given a brief for an airport campaign. So we had a bespoke, media placements at an airport in Australia for people who were flying over for a specific event. And the brief was just for, just generic branding, nothing fancy. Doesn't have to be anything. We don't have time, that kind of thing. Like, this is the media deadline. This is what we've been given. We need to just get something out. I just sat with it for a little bit. And then I asked, how much are we paying for this? And then I found out what the placement was actually costing. And I was like, if we do this, it's literally just going to be wallpaper that no one's going to notice. So I asked, what's driving this timeline? Okay, we actually do have a little bit more time. So I put in a brief to the creative team and we came back with like really simple, just copy lines, like simple execution, copy on background. And it was all tied to hiring and airports. So one of the lines was hiring that's all jet, no lag, and there was something else about like landing the next job. So, and it ended up performing really, really well. It got loads of traction in the media, on social, and like we would have missed that opportunity had we not interrogated that brief and had I not asked those questions and pushed for us to do better. So I think that's something that I would encourage everybody to do, is like ask what's driving the timeline, can we do better? And you might be surprised.
And then, we've worked with you for a while now, and I'm curious if you could explain the type of work that your team does and how you've kind of gotten value partnering with Meaningful Gigs.
Obsessed. So we've been working with you guys for a while, and our team is a team of 80 plus people. We do everything from web to social to email to like you name it, we do it. And because we're such a big team and we look after so many markets, we are, we're under pressure to like resource a week out. So if you miss that deadline, if you're a marketing partner and you need something done, you come to me on a Thursday. I'm like, oh, sorry. Like we already have our whole thing's locked for next week. We won't be able to look at that till next week. So we would miss opportunities sometimes to turn things around quickly or respond to last minute requests. So the partnership with Meaningful Gigs has been invaluable in terms of having like an extension of our team and another arm who gets our brand, who can respond to things quickly, who's in our time zone. Because that's another thing, like we're working across so many time zones, and Lisa is amazing, best in the biz. So yeah, it's just been amazing to have somebody who can help us respond to like quick turn things and just be an extension of our team and give us the agility, because we're a big ship and history has taught us that big ships don't move too quick. So yeah, it's been great.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that, we've been able to provide that value for you, and we love working with you, and the creatives all love it as well. So it's a win-win for everybody. Diving back into, your trajectory, your career in the creative sphere, like what do you consider the biggest challenge you've overcome creatively to date?
I think for me, so I came from smaller agencies, with like, 20 to 60 people, and going into Indeed, where I was the only person based in Europe. So then I brought on a designer for Germany, a designer for France. We had a freelancer in the UK. So being like a satellite team was a challenge, because the rest of my team are based in the US. So just that overlap, we don't have a huge overlap and during the day. So like 3 p.m. for me is 9 a.m. for them. So trying to get work done in a short, span of time over the day with like reviewing things and deadlines. So that can be a sticky challenge. But I would say the biggest thing with remote working, the pandemic didn't help. I think it was my second week at Indeed, I got a text to say, oh, don't come to work today. And I was like, And at that point, like people didn't take their laptops home. Everybody left everything in the office. So I was like, oh my God, I don't even have a laptop. What am I going to do? But I think the biggest challenge working across the time zones is finding time to present the work. Like there's a tendency to send things over cold and like not walk through them with people, and you lose a bit of the ceremony and the excitement and like seeing the work and seeing the idea, and having somebody who's really passionate, who came up with the creative, not get a chance to speak about it like that. I think it's a real missed opportunity. So for me, I would always try and make sure that I would get FaceTime with whoever requested the work, so we could explain like, this is what you asked for, the usual sort of creative presentation, so that they could get excited, get on board, give feedback. You have time for discussion, and then move things forward rather than doing everything on email like facelessly. So I think even if it's remote, in person is obviously the best, but we can't always do that. So yeah, just getting some FaceTime to talk through the work, I think is...
Yeah, I think that's super important. As you say, like when you're presenting the work that you put in so much effort in, it's important to get that immediate kind of feedback, that impression, the reaction. It helps you also in the next iteration, right? It's not just for the enjoyment, it's actually for the better of the work.
Exactly. And then the creatives are in the room, so they're not just being told by the producer, oh, this is what, if they have questions they can ask on the spot, rather than you having to relay it to them. They have questions, you have to go back. So I think it does save time, and it just makes for a better process.
I love your trajectory, your journey to get where you are now. And from your perspective, what kind of advice would you give someone kind of stepping into like a marketing or creative ops role today?
I have two things that come to mind. And the first is to trust your instincts, because I can't tell you the amount of times that I have thought something and been apprehensive to say something because I didn't want to offend somebody, or I wasn't sure if I had the authority, or I needed to stay in my lane, And I would have a decent handful of change if I had €1 for every time I didn't speak up and wished I did. You know, I'd be there in the room, and then somebody more senior than me would raise the exact same point that I was thinking, and then I'd be like, oh, why didn't I just say it? You know, so I think if you have an opinion, if you think something is wrong, if you think something could be better, just speak up and have the discussion with people, because worst case scenario, you're wrong. Okay, whatever. You're just going to get a reputation for somebody who has an opinion and wants to make the work better. And best case scenario, yeah, the work just gets better by having more discussion and raising things that other people haven't seen. So that's one thing. And then the second thing I would say, I don't know about you, Thomas, but I think that creative people tend to be a little bit hard on themselves and like not always remember the wins. You know, you're only as good as your last brief or the work that you did the last time. So what I try and do when I'm having like an off day or I'm not struggling with things is to keep track of the wins. And like I have a list on my phone of things that have gone well or things that I've done to kind of pick me up on the days that I'm struggling, basically. So trust your instincts and keep track of the wins to motivate you when you're not feeling the best.
Self-care, mental motivation, and it's a simple practice that can actually have a huge impact. I might actually start doing that myself. And then let's talk about some fun. So what's the most fun you've had in your role?
I have had a lot of fun. Firstly, I think like you can have fun anywhere with the people that you work with. And I think that's been a real struggle with remote working and COVID and trying to get people back to the office. Like last Wednesday, there was loads of us in because our CMO was over from the US, and you know, we just had so much fun just being around each other. And like you get so much more done when you can just walk over to someone's desk and ask them a question, and or you know, somebody sees you and they're like, oh Eavan, I have something for you. And you know, that's whatever about the work, but like just being around each other, having lunch, going for a drink afterwards, like that is what like work is about, so much more than just doing the job for me. But I can think of one specific example of a project that was really fun. I don't know if you know Paddy Power, they're a betting company. Yeah,
I know Paddy Power well, yeah.
Okay. So
not that well though, but I know what it is.
Yeah. I don't have a problem, I swear. So I an agency that I worked with here in Dublin, because they're an Irish company, I worked for them. I was their account lead, and they came to us with a brief, and they said, look, the Pope is coming to Ireland. This was 2018, and they said, the Pope is coming to Ireland. We want to do something really big splash. We have some budget. I was like, okay, let's see what we can do. So I briefed the team, and one of the ideas that came back was a drive-through confession box. So like you could go to confession and like see the priest and like repent your sins before the Pope arrived, because he hadn't been there since like 1979, I think. So we presented the idea. They were so bought into it. And then I was like, okay, now I have to actually make this happen. How am I going to do this? So I found an abandoned car wash in Dublin, like really near to where the Pope was going to be visiting, and managed to convince the owners to let us basically transform it. So it was picked up by like the Washington Post, like a Sydney news in Sydney. It was like picked up all over the place for like a really cool brand activation. So that was a fun one. And we had like an actor in the little booth pretending to be a priest that would like absolve, you know, had fun with people as they drove in and out. So that was very fun. And then recently, I spoke about our barriers work with Indeed. I wouldn't say it was fun, but like it was incredibly moving and like an experience that I'm going to remember forever. We put on these job fairs for refugees. So with everything that's going on in the world, people have been displaced, they need work, they need to find that sense of meaning and purpose. So we did a series of job fairs in Europe. So I went to one in Berlin, got to speak to job seekers who had been displaced, two girls who were actually they were from Sierra Leone and Nigeria, and they were studying in Ukraine. And with everything that happened in the war there, they had to leave, and they had to restart in Germany. So they were in Germany looking for jobs that they could do while they were studying. And unfortunately, because they had left mid kind of semester, they couldn't pick up where they left off in Germany. So it didn't translate over. So they were literally starting from scratch. So it was really meaningful, and yeah, just really special to speak to people who are going through that. And then, so I was producing a video to capture the day when I was there. And I also got to interview our CEO, Chris Himes, on the topic of refugees and people needing jobs. So that was a real standout moment of last year for me.
We all have our heroes. You're a hero now being on the show. Well, you were a hero before. That's why we wanted you to come on the show. I'm curious, like, who are your heroes in the creative and creative operations space? Who do you kind of admire and draw inspiration from?
So I have to say, Thomas, like, I try and find my inspiration outside of my field, because I feel like if I focus too much on what I'm doing, like, I'll never stop working. So I like to do other things. So like exercising, or I listen to BBC Radio 6 quite a lot. Like, they have very interesting, like, artists of all forms, mathematicians, geneticists, like people who have things to say that aren't directly related to my work that I take inspiration from. So I think finding out what's going on in the world, like, I'm reading a lot of like the New York Times and signed up for all these newsletters and like reading quality journalism. I think the power of the media and storytelling is really important. And I want to read a lot more books in 2024. I have a lot of books behind me here that I haven't read, so I'm not allowed to buy anymore until I read some of them. But one book I'm reading at the moment, actually, which kind of ties back into skills first hiring, is, I actually have it here, it's called The Tyranny of Merit. And it's written by a guy called Michael J. Sandel. He's a political philosopher, and he talks about meritocracy and what that means, and how we need to challenge society to think of meritocracy. So it's quite an interesting read.
I think I actually might pick that. It sounds interesting. Yeah, I might actually add that to my list.
Yeah, do. So basically, like, basically how like the already privileged, you know, think that they got stuff based on merit, but actually they're in a position where they're already, you know, set up for that, and people who aren't are punished because they're in different situations. So yeah, it's fascinating.
Honestly, that was my last question. I just wanted to ask, is there anything else that you wanted to impart on the viewers? Anything you want to plug before we wrap up?
Yeah, I help produce a podcast actually with Indeed. It's called Here to Help. So it's essentially like the red thread that goes through it is how people's experience, strength, and hope inspire them to want to help other people. So we have been putting out like 2 to 3 episodes a month since 2020. It started in the pandemic as a way for Chris, our CEO, to connect with people who work at Indeed and just take time out of their day. And over time, it's graduated into something that has, you know, is a focus on external guests, and we've had some really interesting people on it. So everyone down from Monica Heisey, who wrote for Schitt's Creek, to people who work in green jobs, to Haben Girma, a deaf-blind lawyer who went to Harvard. So we've got a really diverse range of guests. So I would encourage you to check it out.
Yes, and I encourage all the listeners, all the viewers to also please check it out. You'll find a link to it in the description and on the blog post as well. But Eavan, thank you so much for coming on the show. Again, it's such a pleasure to have you on here, and we love working with you at Meaningful Gigs, and we hope to continue with you for a long time to come.